The following is a production of the Ultimate Fantasy Sports Network.
Well, here we are. Just a short time ago, we were talking, Larry, about the preliminary round, and it's come and gone. Welcome, everybody, to the Ultimate Fantasy World Junior Medal Round preview. I'm Dean Millard, proud owner of not only Duckman's Domination, but East End in this tournament, and we'll tell you about that, and of course the insider for UFWJ and so much more. Larry Fisher. I got my shirt on. It says, "Can't I just have hockey tonight?" Because we have no hockey tonight, Larry. It's like the first time in a while I haven't been freezing my you-know-what's off at Rogers Place in the biggest air-conditioned unit in the city. It's weird when you had 3 games a day to go to 0. It's almost like withdrawal.
Yeah, Dean, we are the hockey tonight. That's everybody's watching us instead of the World Juniors. But this has always been a short but sweet tournament, the World Juniors. 12 days it lasts, 10 days worth of games. We're through day 7 now. There's been 7 days of games every day for a full week, starting last Tuesday. And it's amazing how far we've come in the tournament. And again, like I said, short but sweet, made even sweeter by the Ultimate Fantasy World Juniors. And at Christmas time, we tried to do the Ultimate Fantasy World Juniors. We only got 3 days. We're 7 days in. No sign of a shutdown. So all systems go, and we're super excited about the Ultimate Fantasy World Juniors and the UFWJ tournament, wrapping up the preliminary round, heading into the medal round, full steam ahead.
You know, you can't see it in the shot that I'm in right now because it's over there. But over there, I have Notre Dame Hounds jersey. And I've got a hat around here somewhere from the Hounds too. And it kind of reminds me of this whole tournament from December till now. Reminds me a little bit about the Hounds. Their motto is Luctor e Emergo, struggle and emerge. That's the Hounds motto. That's what this entire tournament has been. I mean, it gets canceled 3 days in. Got a third of the players decide not to come back. There's hardly anybody watching. Like, there was me and 70 people watching Austria yesterday. And still, here we are. The crowds got better last night for yesterday for Canada. They were pretty good for USA Sweden, although it was still a small crowd. I mean, you and I talked about it. Seeing some of those guys for $50, that's a heck of a deal. I would have paid. Thankfully, I have a press pass, but I easily would have paid $50 to watch that USA Sweden game. Turned out to be a good game. But that's all in the past. We're going to get to that, but we're also going to look ahead to the rest of the tournament. But before we do that, let's get into a couple of things. We're going to do some storylines, a couple from the group stage of play, but we are, of course, live on Twitch, Ultimate Fantasy Sports. This will be later on our YouTube channel, Ultimate Fantasy Sports Network. You can catch us there. We'll also put it out in podcast form as well. But we're live on Twitch. We would love for you to chime in on the message board. Larry and I will be checking that throughout the evening and tell us what you've thought about the World Juniors and specifically the UFWJ. I mean, I tweeted it out yesterday, Larry, and I know you mentioned it on the watch party. I was on pins and needles watching Austria, Switzerland. Like, honestly, I've never uttered that phrase in my lifetime. But there I was, secretly in my, not outwardly cheering. I had to be careful, like when Finland was not producing against Canada yesterday, I had to be kind of careful about hiding my disappointment, but I had to be also careful about not cheering every time Sebastian Ranishitz made a save. So this is what the Ultimate Fantasy World Junior does, is it makes you care about games you probably normally wouldn't. And the World Junior is about storylines and great storylines, and there's no better storyline than the Latvian storyline this year. I mean, Slovakia went from being on top of the hockey world to missing the medal round, and Latvia gets in, which you would have won a ton of money if you would have bet at Circa before this tournament that Latvia was going to get through to the medal round.
There weren't a ton of surprises, Dean, but that's the surprise that stands out is Latvia, heading into the tournament, and even Bob McKenzie joked about it, and the Latvian players themselves, made fun of the situation, is that with Russia being prevented from coming to this tournament, Latvia was promoted. Actually, Belarus would have been promoted, but they were also prevented. So Latvia, as a runner-up in the Div 1 tournament, got promoted to this tournament, and everybody said they're just happy to be here. Well, look where they are now. They've defeated, and that was such a dramatic way to make the quarterfinals too, because Slovakia was watching in the crowd. Their players were among those 70 people sitting there with you, watching on pins and needles, and again, not just on pins and needles, but on a mid-August summer day. But Slovakia's whole roster was watching that Latvia win over Czechia, and who saw that coming? And that, Slovakia couldn't do anything because they were done already. They played their final preliminary round game. It was a must win for Latvia. They beat Czechia. They're into the medal round. If they don't, Slovakia advances. Everybody expected Czechia to beat Latvia, but Latvia's captain, Ralf Bergmanis, remember that name? We'll hear it a couple more times on today's show, but he stepped up, had a hat trick in the third period and then their goaltender, Bruno Bruveres, another name, stops the Czechia captain, Jan Majšek, on a penalty shot in the third period. But talk about the ultimate drama for Latvia to emerge as the surprise, struggle and emerge as the surprise of the tournament thus far, advancing to the medal round. And like you said, Dean, those storylines translate to UFWJ. I mean, you don't have to look far to see where Ralf Bergmanis ranked among all defensemen in fantasy points. You don't have to look far to find Bruno Bruveres and the Latvian goaltenders, Dean. You'll remember from the supplementary draft where we're replacing those 1/3 of the players, the 103 players out of 250 that weren't back from December being replaced in that draft. Bruno Bruveres fell to the 20th round, Dean. I think he went 70th overall to Scoreway. A couple rounds before that, other countries needed goalies, and it was basically anybody but Latvia. Who's left for goalies? Anybody but Latvia. Dale Hardy and Scoreway steps up. They select Bruno Bruveres in the 20th round of the supplementary draft. Way down the list, and look at him come out and have such a starring role alongside the captain, and really those players have a big impact on our current UFWJ standings.
Well, it's unreal. Like I'm not going to tell you I'm shocked that Austria didn't make the medal rounds. We gambled at East End, as we'll show you as we continue on Sebastian Ranishan's getting us a lot of points, but also that Austria would make it to at least when we were originally drafting, it was at least the relegation, or this time we're thinking, okay, you get to the medal round, and they came awfully close, man. That 5-minute major they took in the final 5 minutes was just so crushing for them, and the Swiss scored. So I'm not going to say I'm totally surprised that they didn't make it, but I don't think there's anybody other than maybe Mark Spector who was betting on Latvia to get to the medal round. So it is a great story, and as it translates. I think also another story, the Republic of Seven Seas decimated by lost players and making a good run, as we'll tell you about when we get to the standings. So it's really cool. It's the people that I was talking to at the arena, when I would tell them, be like, oh yeah, that's my goalie in fantasy, and be like, what do you mean fantasy? I'm like, oh yeah, we have a fantasy. I mean, I was talking to Rob Tichkowski from the Sun. He's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, yeah, we have dynasty fantasy. So he was quite intrigued, and I think people quite enjoyed it. I really wanted to get down and talk to Sebastian Ranishetz and just mention to him, like, hey, we kind of pinned our hopes on you, and you gave us a lot of points, but I had to get on a Zoom call, so I wasn't able to do that. But an interesting tournament. Let's talk more about how the scoring system works as we see the graphic on the screen here. And Larry, we are seeing a lot of interest in that category at the bottom there, time on ice. I mean, World Junior owners and outsiders, I think, are really loving that category.
It adds value to every single player at the World Juniors. And that's what we have to keep reminding people, because, I have Dylan Garand in a hockey pool. There are other people that might have a World Juniors pool with a starting lineup of 6 or 10. But here you got 25-man roster, all 10 countries. Every single player that's at the World Juniors has value. And that's why Dean's on pins and needles watching Austria and Switzerland, because if Austria's fourth-line player gets stuck out there for a minute and a half on a long shift in his own zone, that's fantasy points as far as time on ice goes. Or, last night, Dylan Garand got a shot on goal, and that was as a goaltender. That was the difference in the goaltending award today. But time on ice, especially, Dean, I think it was such a great category to add. And we took out penalty minutes for time on ice. And I think, there's been a couple trades in UFWJ among players this week. That was the best trade of the tournament, was time on ice in, penalty minutes out, because we've seen how many major penalties, 5 in a game, so 15 penalty minutes when you get the 10-minute misconducts going. To take away the value of the heavy penalty minutes in the World Juniors and replace it with time on ice, the value they all have to their team on how that coach runs his lineup, right? Some coaches, I was looking actually, Dean, at that Switzerland ice time chart from that game against Austria. They had a number of forwards. I want to say 4 forwards over 22 minutes of ice time. It's crazy. They basically loaded up on their top line and played them the whole third period by the looks of it. And then you get other guys that don't see a shift all game or only get a couple of shifts. So time on ice, as far as scouting, pre-scouting this tournament, and I mean, we're talking about a guy like Ralph Bergmanis. That's where a lot of his points came from, 25 minutes a game for Austria sometimes. I'm trying to think, there was another one. Oh, East End. I mean, Unfortunately, nobody saw Slovakia getting eliminated, but East End stepped up and took Slovakia's captain, Rayan Petrovicki, and the same thing. He was 22 minutes a night and getting you a couple fantasy points just from his presence and his significance to the country of Slovakia translated to East End. So that category was huge. And again, the goaltending system, Dean, when you look at the top goaltenders for the tournament, and we'll get into that to date, I think that system worked fairly well. It kept all the goaltenders relatively close. No goaltenders put up, even when Slovakia lost 11-1 to Canada, and as mentioned, that was the only big blowout of the tournament. But even Simon Lakosi, who let in, 4 goals on 19 shots and got pulled, he still got a couple fantasy points. I think there was one day that Jan Bednar got minus 0.25. But other than that, all the goaltenders were putting up positive stat lines, which you like to see, because how many times did we see goaltenders get shelled and end up being the player of the game for their country? I know Leon Somner and Thomas Sicanic on the same day on Saturday. For Austria, they lost 7-0 to the U.S. He's the player of the game. And then Canada, the Kent Johnson Michigan goal, which was another huge storyline for East End. But that game, Thomas Sicanic made 52 saves. That was the highest save total in the preliminary round. 52 saves. They lost. Czechia lost 5-1 to Canada, and Thomas Sicanic was the player of the game for Czechia. So the saves added up and resulted in a lot of positive points, even if the scores were somewhat lopsided. The goaltenders all still held their value, which with that scoring system compared to the UFHL, we would have seen a lot of negative stat lines in the UFHL. Here it was all positive, depending on how you structured your goaltending for this tournament.
Yeah, and when we look at the skaters and even the goaltenders, I guess, to a degree, the numbers would look so different because we didn't have penalty minutes. If we did, because there were, Adam Sikora for East End got 5 in a game. Well, that's a lot of penalty minutes that these guys are racking up. So it would look different. So I'm really glad that we looked into that. You know what? Something I'd like to see us look into next year. I don't know if we do it for December or maybe the year after, is incorporate the player of the game into some sort of, whether maybe it's like a bonus or maybe it's like an award, the most player of the games at the end of the tournament gets some sort of, like, they're giving away that stick. I don't know. I think it'd be kind of neat to award that. Now, it's sometimes really subjective. Like, sometimes they pick the guy and you're like, okay, but it's picked by their own team. So it's their own coaches that are looking. And so it might be interesting to look at somehow in some sort of tournament end award for the country that maybe had the most player of the games, because, and sometimes I remember at the Holinka, that was sometimes the most entertaining things. They were putting on those cowboy hats. They get those great sticks now. Sometimes they're not in a great mood, but they're still, posing. There's that famous member, Jordan Eberle, at the I think the Worlds that one time was pretty famous with that young girl. She just didn't want to have the picture or whatever, but that might be kind of fun next year or sometime to incorporate some sort of player of the game, because it is kind of interesting to see a guy gets, lit up 9-3 and he's the player of the game.
I think Valtakunia, George Batchel, if he's watching, he's pounding the table. Yeah, let's do that, because Ridley Gregg, Dean, got 2 player of the games in 4 games. And you said the countries picked their player of the game. And even if they're the standout, I mean, Mason McTavish has 7 goals in this tournament. It's far and away the leader on that front. I think the next best has 4. But, they're not, and I guess 4 of them came in one game. But generally speaking, the countries, they try to spread that around, no different than a minor hockey tournament. When we used to have tournaments, you could be the best player on your team every game. They're gonna spread it around. But Ridley Gregg, how could you not give it to him in the 6-3 win over Finland? Obviously had a goal and an assist, including the game-winning goal. Blocked a ton of shots on the 5-on-3. So within 4 games of the preliminary round, Ridley Gregg won 2 player of the games. And my only objection to the sticks, Dean, and I think you heard it on the watch party, was when the goaltenders won a player of the game, I wanted to see a goaltender stick painted. They were all players' sticks. They didn't have any pre-painted goaltender sticks. And there was a lot of goalies that won player of the game, and they're standing there with a player stick. But still, the artwork was amazing and great to recognize some of the true Indigenous artists in Canada. And I think he did a great job on those sticks. And like I said, that's not a stick you can go buy in a store. So those kids, for their grandkids or whatever, generations down the road, that's going to be a really cool collector's item. And if we ever see one of them pop up on eBay or as an NFT, I'm sure the price will be high for such a unique item. 1 of 1, you can say. I'm
sure every guy who wins player of the game against Canada is like, no offense, Ridley Gregg, but I was hoping to get my picture taken with Connor Bedard or something like that, right? As the player of the game, you're like, oh, I thought it would be Bedard, and I'm getting my picture with this guy. It's like one of the goalies makes a breakaway save on Bedard. Be like, that's your postcard moment of your life if you don't go on to kind of anything, as far as your career or whatever. Great to have Andrea joining in on the chat saying yo, and Andy Mack. Hockey wood. Andy was just at Canton at the Pro Football Hall of Fame and did some fun stuff there. Okay, Larry, let's get into a little bit of standings if we can, and we'll take a look at where we are after the medal round, or after the group stage, heading into the medal round. And, it's interesting. I don't want to say it's that, some teams are out of it, because we just saw our team get 75 points in a day. I mean, you can look and say you're out of it, and you can have one massive day and you are right back in contention.
Absolutely, Dean. And the big thing, and you talk about it all the time when we're on UFHL now, is games played is currency. And that's going to show up going into this medal round, because some countries have a lot more returning players than others. We talked about Republic of the Seven Seas and how they turned over 17 of 25 through the supplementary draft. Well, poor Jeff and Mick, they can't get any luck, Dean. They're only bringing back 16 players, the least by a couple, heading into the medal round. So although they're in 5th place here in the standings, look like a medal contender, you look at a team like Anarchia behind them. They're sending 22 players to the medal round, 6 extra bodies. And then not only that, Dean, when you're looking at these rosters as we get into them here, you're looking not just for who made the medal round, but which countries are going into the semifinals and the medal games. Because if you send, East End sends, let's say you sent 7 Swiss players on to the quarterfinals and they lose, then whoever gets to that semifinals, that's going to be the telling point, because they're guaranteed 2 more games. Win or lose in the semis, they're still getting a medal game. But when we look at the standings in general, Dean, you can't be happier with East End's performance. You haven't even loaded up yet. Today's the trade deadline. Maybe Dean's currently working some trades while we discuss the graphic behind the scenes. But East End has they've made it to the top of the overall standings through the preliminary round, the group stage, with the guys that got them there. No reinforcements yet, but just a tremendous showing for East End from all 3 positions. You've had a very balanced lineup. George Batchel and Jope and Valtakunia are killing it with the forwards, but they don't have as much balance. But that's where they went out and made a couple trade acquisitions that we'll get into. And is that enough to put Valtakunia over the top? And you mentioned it, Dean, the 75 points in a day. Valtakunia had a 75-point day. East End set the record, 78 points in a day. So it's amazing how much one day can swing it. I mean, you look top to bottom, 130 points. Midgard down at the bottom, when we get into the amount of players going to the medal round, they're leading the way with 23. So nothing is settled yet. It's going to be very interesting. And again, as we get into that medal round, whoever is the most players going into the semifinals is all of a sudden going to be a medal favorite, because they're guaranteed 2 more games, where all those other players are done for the tournament. And you made a great point, Dean, when you were drafting Sebastian Ranishets and some people were drafting Austrian players, Senna Peters for Elite Prospectia, guys like that. They were looking at that thinking, okay, well, they're going to play a best of 3 relegation and we're going to get some more points. Unfortunately, the way this tournament's set up, there is no relegation. There will be relegation in December, Gord Miller mentioned. So the guys that are coming back from those countries will get the extra games in December, but not unfortunately not here. So games played, we always talk about it in the UFHL being the currency. It's going to be the case coming out of these quarterfinals tomorrow.
Yeah, and listen, I'm giving full credit to Ian Constable because it was a brilliant strategy when it came to the goaltending. I was maybe the guy saying, let's take a goalie. And Craig and Ian were like, stop talking to us. We're drafting a winning team here. Go get us some hot dogs or something like that. I'm like, okay, well, I'll get some hot dogs. You guys draft a team. So I honestly, if it was me, I probably would have taken a goalie earlier. But their strategy, we'll see. It's still, we're still only halfway there, so to speak. But it worked perfectly if there was relegation, because Austria, we would be getting at least 2 more games, most likely of Sebastian Ranishets. It didn't work out perfectly, but as we'll see, we do have some options going forward into the medal round, and that's where we're going to get into some of the, I guess, the by position. So let's start, when you and I are both goalies, let's start with goalies then. Let's start with the stats by position when it came to goaltenders.
And no surprise to me, Dean, to hear you say that you were pounding the table for a goaltender. Again, being from the goalie fraternity, it's hard not to want a goaltender early. But there you see, look how close the goaltending stats were, and East End's right there in the mix at number 3. But Anarchia, who has the tandem of Dylan Garand and Sebastian Cossa, obviously Canada went 4-0 in the round or in the group stage. Dylan Garand had 3 solid victories. Sebastian Cossa won the opener. They didn't face a ton of shots. That's why Anarchia is not up at 40 or 50 points because saves is such a big category as well. Monstopia, I think, probably had the best goaltending structure, Dean. But what burnt them is Sweden only played Jesper Wallstad 2 out of 4 games so far. They split. Kelly Klang and Wallstad each got 2 starts. And then also on the first day of the tournament, or second day of the tournament, all 3 of Monstopia's goaltenders started on the same day. They had Jesper Wallstad going for Sweden, Noah Patnode going for Switzerland, and Florian Bugel going for Germany. And you can only start one of the 3. So the other 2 got bench stats, but they went with their number 1 guy, Dean, and Jesper Wallstad delivered. Out of the 3, he had the most fantasy points that night. And we all know the decision that Valtakunia made on I believe that was Saturday, when they started Juha Jakola against Slovakia for Finland. Finland won 9-3, but Jakola barely had any shots, didn't put up a great stat line, I think 4.5 points, and they benched their number 1 guy, their trade acquisition, Caden Maberko of the U.S. U.S. went on and beat Sweden 3-2 that night, and Maberko had 9 fantasy points, had double the fantasy points, and you're looking at the overall standings going into the medal round. Valtakunia and East End would almost be tied had the Valtakunia went with their number 1 guy, and that's always a tough decision. Both guys are starting on a day, Dean. Do you go with the guy that's going to face more shots and have a tougher chance to get the win, or do you go with the guaranteed points of assuming Finland's going to beat Slovakia, which is what George did? But the saves for Mbereko, when Sweden pushed in the third period, Mbereko went ahead of Juha Jakola, and now those are points left on the table by not starting your number 1. But certainly, Scoreway, we talked about it, Dean. Bruno Bruveres from Latvia. Look at that stat line. That was really Scoreway's only goaltending points, was Latvia's win and overtime loss, and a ton of saves. He was making 45-plus saves every time out, stopping penalty shots in the third period. And then Republic of the Seven Seas, last but not least, Dean. They had Levi Merilainen, Finland's number 1 goaltender. He obviously lost to Canada on yesterday on Monday, but besides that, he had a pretty flawless tournament, winning his other 2 starts. And then they also had that tough decision on Saturday where they started Leon Sommer of Austria over Thomas Suchanek, and they're both the player of the game. And they obviously, Suchanek would have been the better play on Saturday, but they couldn't complain with the effort they got from Leon Sommer either in Austria. So all in all, though, as you can see, the goaltending stats are very close heading into the medal round, and now it's about whose goaltenders advanced to the medal round. When we look back on this next Sunday, when we do the recap of the tournament, if we do another show recapping the medal round, the countries that go into those medal games and win 2 or 3 more games are the countries that are going to end up at the top of the goaltending leaderboard.
Yeah, I know they said, Valtakunia said they were taking a gamble that day. I looked at it as they took the safe way because they were guaranteed the win point. Well, not guaranteed, but better chance at taking the wins. I think Merburko would have been the gamble because that's a tougher game. You don't know. But everybody, we had times where we're like, maybe we should start this guy because we know he's starting. You sometimes don't know. Even you get those lineups, Larry. There's not, and you look at the the top guy in the lineup for the goalie. It's not always the starter. It's so different in international. So, you sometimes you get burned. Sometimes it works out perfectly, and that's unfortunately the luck of the draw. I mean, Charlie Stramel played 1 game for us for East End for the Americans. Different guys are scratched. The Brendan Othman was the number 1 pick. He was scratched in the first game. So it certainly worked out since then. But you are at the mercy of the lineups. And the other day we had almost all of our Finns on one line, and yesterday they're split up between 3. Well, the other day they got like all those points, and yesterday split up they got none. So you're at the mercy of the lineups of the coach, basically, just like you are always in fantasy, whether the running back gets taken out in the fourth quarter or whatever happens, right?
Absolutely, and that we've seen that throughout the tournament. And you mentioned Finland for East End. Sorry, when you got 6 Finns and they're playing head to head with Canada, and Valtakunia's got 6 Canadians. Every time there was a play or a power play or special teams, it almost felt like East End was playing Valtakunia. So it was great drama, great theater, and it's only going to get better because those teams very well could play again in the medal round. And obviously we're looking at the overall standings. It's very close between those two. When you look at the other positions, Dean, again you see the balance of power, and what I really see is the balance with East End. You're number 3 in goaltending, number 1 in defenders, and number 2 in forwards. So. And I'm sure you guys strategize that to get some balance in your lineup.
For sure. We looked at it, in the original draft, we went Cole Perfetti, Kent Johnson 1-2, and we were loving that. And we could have loaded up, but then we went and we said, okay, which, and we took, I think it was Zellweger 3rd because of the power play. And even in December, that was our strategy. So, you don't take Perfetti and you take Ratty. Well, power play points are bonuses. So we wanted to look at it and say, certainly the December, we had a different strategy than this redraft because of the groups were different. And so our strategy this time around was let's load up on the Finns and take our Canadian hats off for this tournament. And I know you were talking about it yesterday on the watch party. Like, I will literally cheer for Finland. If it's Finland, it'll be the first time I have ever not cheered or cheered against Canada. But I'm telling you, if Finland plays Canada in the gold medal game, I will full on, well, I won't be out loud full on because I'll be at the game in the press box, but I will in my head be cheering for Finland because it will help my fantasy team. And I'm sorry, sports is not the same. I was in broadcasting for 25 years, basically, where you couldn't have a favorite team. And now all my favorite teams are fantasy because that's what you do when you're in broadcasting. And you know this, Larry, you're a journalist. You can't have a favorite team if you're covering it in that league. So fantasy becomes your favorite team. I watch sports based on fantasy now, and I cheer based on fantasy. That even means I've cheered for a San Francisco Giant in my life, which makes me almost throw up in my life, or cheered for a Flame at some point. But I will be looking at Finland to win if Finland takes on Canada, as weird as that sounds.
If Finland wins gold, I mean, I don't see anybody overtaking East End with the roster structure and composition being heavy on Finns. For no doubt they're the favorite for East End, and I think when you look at those overall standings again, Dean, if it's close going into, let's say, a medal game and Canada and Finland are playing, that could very well be the deciding factor. And even if you're cheering for Canada, if Canada gets ahead 5-1 again, you are absolutely cheering that Finland makes that a 5-4 game and keeps it interesting, because you look at Valtakunia's forwards here, Dean, and a big reason they're at the top and with, almost a 50-point lead as far as forwards go is their Team Canada. They obviously they acquired William Dufour as well, but they went in with the best luck as far as returnees go, with Mason McTavish surprisingly playing in this tournament and dominating this tournament, Connor Bedard being the next big thing. And then also having Ridley Gregg emerge as one of the big stars or big storylines for Canada, one of their top forwards thus far. And they also have Will Cooley in there, and go up and down the lineup for Valtakunia. Half their forwards are Team Canada forwards. So if Canada goes far and Finland goes far, you're really looking at Valtakunia East End potentially. I mean, Scoreway's still hanging around there. Some other countries could maybe make a run for it. I know Anarchia is trailing a bit, but they have the Canadian goaltending tandem, and they have a lot of players that look like they're promising to make it into the semifinals and the medal games. But overall, as far as the fandom goes, it's totally understandable that East End's favorite team in this tournament is Finland.
Godfathers Hockey Club. That's blasphemy, Dino. LOL. I gotta go with fantasy. That's how I live my life. It's how I live my life. It's how I support my wife. I'm also a poet now, apparently, too. But I cheer based on who's on my fantasy teams. But one thing I used to do is I wouldn't pick a flame, or I wouldn't pick a giant. Well, if you're going to pick with your heart, you're not going to be successful a lot of the time. So you have to learn to love the enemy a little bit when you're, you grew up an Oiler fan, I grew up an Oiler fan. It's ingrained in us not to like Calgary, but Sean Monahan produces for Duckmans this year. I'll be as happy as anybody. So it is quite interesting how fantasy has changed the way a lot of people. And I mean, that Valtakunia, the McTavish Bedard situation is ridiculous. Like, Connor Bedard went into December as the 13th forward, and very quickly was not the 13th forward, as has happened, and is now, was done the top line. But we honestly, when we discussed this, we did not think he would have that big of an impact. And, would he still be having that impact if the tournament had gone off properly and guys like Cole Perfetti, he still was going to be pushed up. But that, like the other day, a point shot goes off McTavish's knee. Like, he needs them to go in off of his knee. The guy is ridiculous. Both of those guys are having competition for who can go bar down the most. I mean, it's like, you talk about us having the Finnish mafia. Valtakunia has the Canadian mafia. They can't walk and not trip over one of their Canadian players scoring.
Yeah, they're loaded with Canadian players, and that 1-2 punch, there's no better. I mean, you look at Valtakunia, or you look at East End, you got Ratty and Hervonen as line mates on Finland's top line, 2/3 of Finland's top line, and then, with East End, and then you got Valtakunia with 2/3 of Canada's top line with McTavish and Bedard, and they've been leading the way. They've, Kent Johnson's been good. The
Canadians are better. Like, there's no comparison.
Yeah.
If the Finns are good, but it's not a comparison, right?
So far through the group stage, obviously the one head-to-head matchup shows that, and when you look at the points to date, certainly McTavish is leading the way there as far as our MVP candidate in UFWJ. He's almost 10 fantasy points ahead of the nearest competitor, who's actually Joachim Kemmel of Scoreway, is the next nearest competitor, followed by Atu Ratty of East End. So when you look at the top three forwards, there's 2 Finns and a Canadian, and then Valtakunia has 2 more, as far as Thomas Bordeleau, who they stole, who slid to the second round, 7th overall in the supplementary draft. Talk about getting a gift there. That's why they're in the medal hunt. And then obviously they acquired Matt Coronado as well, who's just outside the top 5, and then Bedard rounds out the top 5 as far as the forwards go, and there's only one defender, Dean, that has more fantasy points than I guess he would rank 4th overall, and that's Emil Andre of Scoreway, Sweden's captain. He's been a dominant force. I think he's got 4 goals in the tournament and logs, again, a ton of ice time. And then obviously you're looking at D, right there's Olin Zellweger from East End is number 2, and Luke Hughes from Valtakunia is number 3. So some real firepower on the back end as far as guys that are going to be great NHL players. And then the surprises for me, Ralph Bergmanis of Monstopia, It ranks 4th overall among defenders in fantasy points. And Casper Puccio, Dean, is number 5 from East End. He's been a pleasant surprise getting on that top power play. Everybody thought Topi Niemela would be the number 1 guy for Finland, and he still plays the most minutes. But Casper Puccio has emerged as a real offensive catalyst for Finland in this tournament.
Yeah, surprisingly, I thought with the amount of forwards skill they had, they would go 4 forwards and 1 D. But Puccio and Niemela has been out there, and Ruben Rafkin has been on the top pairing a couple of times. Our Finns have been extraordinary. Like that's the reason that we have had so much success. I mean, that the one day they just all contributed, and then the next day it was like they were gone. So it was like feast or famine a little bit. Godfather's HC. It's easy for me to take the high road when UCAN is out of the medal race, so I do understand your stance, buddy. Yeah, listen, I will be happy if Canada wins, but you know what? I'm also at the point, Larry, where I love getting up at 4 a.m. to watch these games with my dad, and I lived and died with the result. 46-year-old Dean Millard is more about practicality and like, hey, if this guy does this, I get paid or whatever it is. So I still want Canada to win at a lot of things, but if it means me winning money, and we're talking, pretty high stakes of this fantasy league, I cheer for my fantasy teams all the way. That is definitely how I do things. So, okay, so where do we want to get to next? We've talked a little bit about the standings. We've gone through some of the positions. You've also mentioned the guys who have stood out positionally. And like I said, we looked at those standings, and it can be so close. We could see some moves being made still potentially, but we do have a couple of trades to talk about. Not many. There's a lot more sellers than there are buyers. And let's remember, it's a 10-country tournament. So let's talk about the first trade that took place fairly early in this tournament.
Yeah, day 2 of the tournament, we saw the first big trade. Valtakunia stepped up and addressed their goaltending because they didn't really have any goaltenders coming back for this tournament. Nobody that was guaranteed to get a start anyway. Again, because every single player at the World Juniors is rostered, and they had 3 backup or number 3 goaltenders. They went out and acquired Caden Emberko of the United States. And I know Rob from the Godfathers, Rob, Paul, and Nelson just said that, how did he word that, Dean? He said, they're out of the mace, but and can appreciate your stance. But let's think about this for a minute. If Canada, USA were playing for gold, UCAN Republic, if Caden Emberko wasn't the starter for the United States and it was Andrew Oak or it was Remington Koppel, I think UCAN Republic might be cheering for Team USA over Canada in the gold medal game because we had the U.S. goaltender potentially. So that's how fantasy does impact. If UCAN Republic was in the running for a medal or was right there going for gold and they had the American goaltender going into that championship game, I think they would be cheering for the U.S. potentially over where they're from, Canada. But in this case, Caden Emberko has been solid for the Americans. George Batchel acquired him actually before the Americans' first game, but the lineups had already locked for that day because Finland had started. As you mentioned, they don't announce the goaltenders ahead of time. So the first game of the tournament, actually the points went to Midgard. From Midgard's stance on this trade, Dean, Carl Lindbaum, it's an interesting trade. Both these goaltenders are 2003 born, so they're both going to be back in December. Obviously, Emberko, if he plays good in this medal round, he's probably obviously going to be returning as the number 1 goaltender for Team USA, whereas Lindbaum, he's the number 3 guy behind Jesper Wallstad and Kalle Klang, who each got 2 starts in the group stage, but they're both 2002 born. Neither of them are going to be back in December. So the only returning goaltender for Sweden is going to be Carl Lindbaum, and Sweden obviously should be a top 4 country again come December. So Midgard traded essentially starting goaltenders in December to kick the ball down the road, and they also receive a second-round pick in 2023, which obviously the December tournament goes into January. That is the 2023 draft pick. And when you acquire a pick, Dean, and we should address that, it's for the annual draft because this is a dynasty league. Jesper Wallstad will be back for Monstopia or whoever happens to acquire him later today. So when you look at it that way, they're going to have to replace one of their goaltending spots in that annual draft. So you'll have a number of returnees, likely have more than usual, probably in that 10 to 15 range. Plus, it's a dynasty league. There's a protected list. Some of those players, I know East End's hoping some of their players are promoted to the active roster, come December. So you're only going to have so many spots to fill in that annual draft. But in the first two rounds, the first and second round picks are tradable assets. So what happened here was Midgard now has 2 picks in the second round as they're filling out their roster in December. And Valtakunia will pick in the first round and then not again until the third round. So all in all, from Valtakunia's standpoint, to grab a starting goaltender for a number 3 goaltender when both are returning in December at the cost of a second round pick, and to give yourself a second position of power, forwards, and now potentially goaltending, a smart move by George Batchel and the Valtakunia management team to address their goaltending early on in the tournament.
Well, and shows they're in win now mode as we look at the second trade that they made, because they are in obviously an extremely high position in the standings. When we look at we looked at the standings earlier, they're right behind East End, which is our club. And they're obviously going for it. It means they're going to draft later in the first round, probably, because they're going to be, a medal contender, and not for a while. So they're going to have some time to kill at the draft. But they might be counting their gold medals while doing it.
That's what I was going to say, Dean, is, and I don't think they're going to make that decision or that gamble again to not start Caden Mberico in the medal round. They hope he gets 3 more starts, and that would be huge for them, especially if East End happened to get no more starts. 3 goaltending starts could put Valtakunia over the top potentially. But the real ringer here is Matt Coronado, who's just been shooting the lights out for Team USA. In his Valtakunia debut, he had 2 goals, including the game winner over when US beat Sweden. And now they have we talked so much about their firepower from Canada, which, William Dufour got the empty netter yesterday and had a good game in his Valtakunia debut. And he joins, now they have 2/3 of the top line with, obviously with McTavish and Bedard, and then 2/3 of the third line with Ridley Gregg and now William Dufour. But they also have 2/3 of Team USA's top line and power play with Thomas Bordeleau and Matt Coronado. So, I mean, if Canada, USA advance, and having Caden Mberico in goal with Luke Hughes as your number 1 blue liner from Team USA, Valtakunia is still probably going to be the team to beat in this medal round, assuming those countries play 3 more games versus some of the other countries. Justin Volek, a German forward, was also in there. But from Monstopia's side, and you look at the standings, Dean, Monstopia is in 4th place, only 40 points, 30 points back of the medal. They basically just took a hard look at this and said, we're built for the future. They have guys like Frank Nazar, Jonathan Lekaramaki, Simon Edmondson will probably be back at Christmas. They have a really young team. They obviously expect Connor Geekie to hopefully make Canada's team in December. He came over from the protected list from Valtakunia. And then they took back 3 other forwards that are all going to be there in December. And obviously not big name guys, but Peter Hauser will be there for Czechia. Sandis Vilmanis and Pateras Permelis. That's a bit of a tongue twister, but those 2 will be back for Latvia in December, and obviously they advanced to the medal round as well. Whereas Valtakunia, we talked about Caden Mberico being a 2003, and he's going to come back in December. Well, Matt Coronado and William Dufour are both 2002 guys. So if Monstopia wasn't going to win a medal here, those guys aren't coming back in December. Being a dynasty league, you're always planning for the future. So you mentioned Valtakunia is going to be waiting a while to make a pick. Their first pick's going to be in the 3rd round. Well, they're also not going to have Matt Coronado or William Dufour on the roster because this is their final tournament. So Valtakunia is going all in on this summer tournament. They want to win, and then it'll be a regroup, might be a rebuild type. They might be the Latvian underdog of the December tournament, depending what they have coming back at other positions. Obviously, they will have Luke Hughes back and Connor Bedard's back, so it's not the end of the world. But you're losing Thomas Bordeleau, you're losing Mason McTavish, you're losing Matt Coronado. Up and down the list, those guys are going to be playing pro hockey and aren't age eligible for the December tournament. So they're in win now mode. Monstopia's looking to the future. They're hoping they get 2 World Juniors out of Connor Geekie, and obviously now they have 2 first-round picks in December to go with a lot of their returning talent, including those 3 forwards. that will be back as depth guys for their roster going with World Junior experience, which is important. You get that experience in your returnee. Even those two Latvian forwards, they're getting medal round games. That's going to be great experience going into December, and they'll probably put up even more fantasy points. So steep price to pay, for Monstopia to tap out when you're in fourth place and you look like you're a medal contender, and you got Jesper Wallstad among others, and obviously they had Matt Coronado to sort of tap out there. It's a tough decision. But Valtakunia stepped up and paid the price they wanted to acquire a couple ringers for the medal round.
Yeah, we looked at this trade, and, we had discussions with a few teams, nothing in depth, but, both Ian and I, chatted about this, and we said, we're not willing to pay that price. It's nothing against Valtakunia doing it. It just wasn't what we were willing to pay. We'll still have a discussion or two with, there's a couple of teams that we might reach out to, but I can honestly tell you there's probably a 90% chance we stand pat. I mean, our roster is first after the group stage without making a single move. And now we lose the guy we were really counting on in our goaltender, and we could easily drop down into the bottom half of the standings without any goalie stats. But it is what it is. This is the way we view this tournament compared to some others, and everybody has their own strategy. It's the beautiful thing about this.
Dean, don't look at the chat because it's got bad news. As you say, George Batchel's in there letting us know he's the insider. He's telling us Valtakunia has another trade to announce. They've traded their 2024 first-round pick, so now they're giving up the next year's first-round pick as well with Lucas Horl and Dennis Bacala, two guys that I believe both missed. They both missed the medal round, so they're not going to be playing tomorrow in a quarterfinal game. They've acquired Donovan Sabrango, the penalty-killing minute muncher for Canada, shot-blocking machine. Shot blocks don't count in UFWJ, but he's been munching a lot of minutes. And then he's trying to keep up with you on the Finns. He acquired Alexi Hemosalmi. So, and this is the Godfathers. Rob's not helping you out here. He's in here having a good chat with us. Meanwhile, he's behind the East End's back. He's wheeling and dealing with your number one rival for gold in Ultimate Fantasy World Juniors. But we talked about no defense or not much on defense for Valtakunia as far as going into the medal round and how East End was much more balanced. Well, now you got Luke Hughes, Alexi Hemosalmi, and Donovan Sabrango. So all of a sudden, and they have three defensemen from Team Canada and one Finn and two Americans. So all of a sudden they got some power on defense. So you might want to shut down the live show and get the GM hat back on to try and match this, or you might sit back and say, you know what, let's see how this plays out. If like I said, win with the guys that got you here.
Yeah, I have no problem letting our roster try and medal, and I've said that to Ian. And listen, I'm not going to say something doesn't fall into our lap that we end up doing, but if nothing happens, I like it. The Latvians getting through. That helps us, man. We've got some skilled Latvians on our club that we're really excited about. So, we're upset that Austria. That's the biggest loss for us. Slovakia, we had a couple of guys, but we had some guys that were in and out of the lineup. So, hey, man, all the power to Valtakunia for loading up. Maybe our challenge is let's try to win without making a trade. And if we don't, then so be it. If we struggle, and we said if we were going to fall out of it, we might have turned into sellers. You finish top three, you're in the money. You don't, you get a better draft position for December. So I'd love to win this tournament, Larry, but I don't want to sacrifice December for this tournament when we are in our position we're in. And that might mean watching Valtakunia pass us. It'll be something I'll have to live with, and hopefully Craig will forgive Ian and I for making those decisions.
Yeah, you're in a great position with East End to be 1-2 one way or the other, and we talked about that, Dean. I mean, we're going to recap the predictions heading into the tournament later in the show, but myself and yourself as well had Valtakunia and East End 1-2. We just had them flipped, and it's a matter of do these trades switch the give Valtakunia that edge going into the medal round from where we stand coming out of the group stage. And and that's the thing when we look at the going forward is how many players does everybody have advancing? And now you got Valtakunia. We're going to put up a graphic showing how many players each country has advancing. And now all of a sudden Valtakunia has the most because they just acquired two more in Saprango and Himo Selmi. So all of the sudden, Valtakunia now has the most players advancing to the medal round with 24. So all of a sudden, and again, there's a lot of Canada, there's a lot of USA, and now there's even some Finland in there. So Valtakunia is pretty loaded for this medal round. Anarchia might make a bit of a run. Surprising, obviously, that Midgard has the most players advancing to the medal round because they were one of the early sellers. But when you look at the players advancing, yes, there's some from Sweden and Finland, but they're more so depth players. They're not they do have Logan Cooley, who's a big ringer from Team USA and some other guys, but they're bringing up the rear in the standings through the group stage. And even though they have the most players, they're probably not going to make up that much ground. But I look at Anarchia, especially with that Canadian goaltending tandem again. They got some good forwards from the U.S., Sweden, Finland. They're going to have a lot of players that get, and obviously some good Canadian defensemen. They're going to have a lot of players that get the three more games, right? The quarterfinal, the semifinal, and the medal game. Whereas some other countries, when you really look at it, if you have players from Switzerland, Czechia, Latvia, and who am I missing there? Germany. And not to say there's not, there you go, Dean. We're saying there's going to be no upsets tomorrow. Yeah. It's going to be Canada, USA, Sweden, Finland advancing. But again, if you have players from Germany, Switzerland, Czechia, and Latvia, if they lose tomorrow, you only get one more game from those players. Anybody who's got players from Canada, USA, Finland, and Sweden, they're guaranteed three more games. Games played are going to become currency as this tournament gets into the semifinals and the medal round. Somebody has a big couple games there. That, like I said, that 75 points in a day isn't unattainable. So this tournament's as far as Ultimate Fantasy World Juniors goes.
Yeah, it's going to be a really interesting Thursday. And keep in mind, the games start, 10 a.m. my time, so noon Eastern, 4 games. So that ice on that fourth game, it's not going to be that great. Plus, it's 30 degrees here in Edmonton, so the ice is taken, it's going to, that's why it's, minus 50 in that building all the time, is because they need to keep the ice down. So I understand it. But that fourth game, even the Canadian game, you've chewed up with 2 games before that. It's the third game. Canada's always played the second game of each day. It's going to be really interesting to see what the ice conditions are like for that final game. Okay, so this is the official roster for East End as we head into the medal rounds. And we're going in the order of the standings, which with Valtakunia loading up could change very quickly. But what strikes you about this lineup going into the medal round?
Well, we talked about, Dean, the amount of players that are going to advance to the semifinals. You look here, a lot of Finns. We've talked about 6 Finns, if I'm counting right, 2D and 4 forwards. And then you got, your arguably your top forward and top defender are both from Canada. So that's going to be, obviously you're expecting 3. You're not expecting Canada to get upset by Switzerland. So there's 3 extra games, and they're going to be go-to guys in all situations. And Torgerson from Sweden, could obviously advance as well. The goaltending, as we mentioned, Dean, is the one area that we don't know what Germany's going to do tomorrow, whether they're going to play Florian Bugel or Nikita Kapp. They split the preliminary round. Both had 2 good games in the group stage. But regardless of who they start, we don't expect them to necessarily win tomorrow. They're not going to be the favorite. So unless Dylan Grant and Sebastian Kosa both get food poisoning for Anarchia and Brett Brochu steps up, you're probably only going to get at most 1 more goaltending start with the goalies you have. So that would be the downside would be in goal. The upside is just, again, the firepower up front and the fact that Kasper Puccio has emerged as, a top 5 defender in this tournament. You got two of the top 5 defenders in Zellweger and Puccio. They currently rank 2nd and 5th in fantasy points going into the medal round. Sebastian Ranishets was just outside of the top 5 in goaltending, actually, Dean. I didn't recap the goaltenders, but Dylan Garand was number 1. Caden Mbarico and Bruno Bruveres were tied for number 2. Simon Lakosi was number 4 from Slovakia, and then Levi Marilainen from Finland was number 5. But there's one, Dean, that those stats for goaltenders are going to look completely different come Sunday or Saturday night than they do today, because obviously Simon Lakosi, he's done. Slovakia's out. They're not getting any more fantasy points. And when you look at Bruno Bruveres, and as far as Latvia goes, if Latvia loses tomorrow, he's one and done. Whereas these other goalies, including Jesper Wallstad, who didn't crack the top 5, are going to get, potentially 3 more games to rise to be the top goaltenders. So it'll be interesting to see if we see any more goaltending movement, because Jesper Wallstad's name's out there from Monstopia, as is Levi Marilainen. They've been dangling him. Republic of the Seven Seas have been dangling Marilainen. You could go all in on Finland and grab the goaltender too. But just generally speaking, this lineup has taken you to first place through the group stage with great performances from the go-to guys. Atu Ratti, 2nd overall pick, Dean. You couldn't have asked for a better performance from Atu Ratti. He's delivered. He's the 3rd ranked forward overall in UFWJ through the group stage. So he's been a stud as the 2nd overall pick in the supplementary draft. And then obviously, his line mate Roni Hirvonen didn't miss the top 5 by much. And even Kasper Samontavel is another Finn who stepped up. Oh, he stepped up for Finland in the tournament, Dean. He scored a game-winning goal and a shootout, everything else. But at the same time, he's stepping up for East End as well. So, and I think a sleeper here, Dean, could be Michael Gut. I know Michael Gut really well from Everett. Him and Stanislav Svozil, they're both imports in the WHL. Svozil for the Regina Pats. He's teammates with Connor Bedard. But if Czechia is going to upset USA on some terrible ice tomorrow night at the late game, Gut and Svozil will have to have a huge role for Czechia. And you mentioned the bad ice. East End is hoping that ice is extra bad, because Charlie Strammel doesn't play a whole lot for East End. And then you look at Valtakunia, and we'll get there. But they just, I guess they didn't acquire another American today, but they obviously acquired Caden Mbarico and Matt Coronado earlier. Drafted Thomas Bordeleau with their top pick in the redraft, and Luke Hughes was a returnee. So as far as Valtakunia goes, they're going to be loaded with Americans. So hope for bad ice, and hope that Gut and Svozil help Czechia pull off an upset over USA tomorrow night.
Yeah, that would certainly help. That sort of and that's the sort of bounce that I think we're going to need. I mean, in a perfect scenario tomorrow, to be honest with you, Bugle starts for Germany, gets absolutely shelled by the Finns, and then Quap goes in and mops up and doesn't get charged for the loss and just gets us save points. Like, honestly, that's what I said to Ian. That's a perfect situation. Our Finns light it up. Our other goalie goes in and doesn't take the loss points. And here's the other thing. I don't think we've seen the best of Kent Johnson in this tournament yet. Like, I think Kent Johnson's been good and he's been effective. I think Kent Johnson could probably have, and probably should have, another 5 points. Like, I think you could see Kent Johnson just go monster crazy in a quarterfinal or a semifinal or maybe a final. But I still think there's a big game to come from Kent Johnson. I know Bedard and McTavish have gotten a lot of headlines, rightfully so. But that Forrester, Johnson, Stankoven line has gotten better and better as this tournament has gone on.
And, I mean, Kent Johnson probably has the highlight of the tournament with his Michigan goal. But besides that, you're right. He's been a bit snake-bitten. Some goaltenders have robbed him. He's hit some posts. McTavish has had one goal going off his shin pad. He scored some highlight reel goals as well, and so has Bedard. But when you look at the top 5 forwards to this point in the tournament, McTavish and Bedard are 1 and 5 as the 2 Canadians within the top 5. Kent Johnson's probably somewhere in the 5 to 10 range, but he has that potential to challenge for tournament MVP with 3 big games against Switzerland, and then the semifinal. And obviously everybody in Canada is hoping they're playing for gold, not bronze, come Saturday. But he's going to be playing on Friday and Saturday, barring a miraculous upset for Switzerland. So I think you're right. I think Kent Johnson is going to look to step it up in the medal round and maybe pacing himself a little bit. So for East End to have success and to certainly stay in the lead, you're currently topping the overall standings. To win gold, Kent Johnson's going to need to be a stud these next 3 games for Canada. And it's funny, Dean, I didn't realize that Finland was playing Germany. Well, I knew that, but it just didn't register in my head when we were talking that Finland could be lighting up your own goaltender tomorrow. And do you hope, obviously when you got 6 Finns, if Cap is in as the starter, you still hope he gets lit up. I mean, sorry to throw him under the bus, but you can't have him standing on his head and shutting down 6 of your skaters for one good goaltending performance. So no offense to Nikita Cap, but if he's in goal tomorrow, East End's not cheering for Germany. They're cheering for Finland.
Yeah, a perfect scenario for us is a massive, massive blowout. All right, so this roster looks a little bit different now because of the trade that just broke and by the way, was confirmed by both franchises in the chat. So it is official, but this is the Valtakunia roster that is oh so close on the heels of East End. And, I honestly, I don't think you need to look any further than the top 3 guys on this list right now, especially this week. Like, those guys have, and you knew the first 2 were going to be pretty good. Ridley Gregg, and I could say I knew this was going to happen because I watch him in Brandon all the time, but you didn't know it was going to happen. I didn't know Ridley Gregg was, I knew he was going to be a rambunctious force, but an offensive force as a third-line shutdown guy. That's the biggest bonus and present for Valtakunia, other than Bordelot in the draft.
Yeah, two gifts, 2 great emergent struggle for Valtakunia that way. But there wasn't much of a struggle with the getting McTavish and Bedard back off the start, as well as obviously Luke Hughes being their number 1 defenseman as a returnee. Going into this tournament, Valtakunia probably the favorite just based on the fact that they had the best returning talent from the December draft. But you look up and down that lineup, Dean, all 14 forwards are going to the medal round. And you go, what is that? That's 11 forwards deep of forwards that are expected to advance to the semifinals and get those 3 extra games. You see 5 defensemen there. Well, now there's 7, and one of them's from Canada and one of them's from Finland. So you're looking at 6 out of the 7 defensemen are expected to get 3 more games. So 11 forwards, 6 defensemen is 17, and a goaltender. And Bariko, I think Finland's going to go too, but I don't think Jakola's going to see the net again. So you're looking at 18 players from Valtakunia are expected to get 3 more games each. So that is impressive. With that roster composition of players that are, barring the upset. If US gets upset by Czechia, well, now we're looking back at East End with some go-to guys from Czechia that might all of a sudden swing the balance of power back. But on paper here, with 5 forwards from Canada, 4 forwards from the US, 2 from Sweden, and then you look over on D, you got 3 defensemen from Canada, counting Donovan Sabrango as their trade deadline ringer. Obviously, Del Maestro has had and Lambos has been the odd man out. He hasn't been playing, and Del Maestro's sort of been the third pair guy, a late addition to the team. But Sabrango's been a big minute guy. He's not showing up on the score sheet, but he's logging. He's going to get that time on ice stat, put it that way. Luke Hughes is their number 1 defenseman offensively, and now their number 2 defenseman offensively is going to be a Finn in Alexi Himoselmi, who just missed the top 5. He was just below Kasper Puccio and Topi Namela. They're kind of the big 3 for Finland offensively or fantasy point-wise. So now they've added Finn in there. I think that's their only Finn, Dean. And then the goaltender Jakola, the backup. But that's their only Finn who's going to be an impact player. So, East End's loaded in Finns. Valtakunia had no impactful Finns. Now they got Alexi Himoselmi. If Finland does well, he's going to have to be a big part of it for Valtakunia. But I think you're right. This is really going to come down to, if we're looking at a 1-2 battle the rest of the way, Canada-Finland. If Finland wins gold, that's going to be East End's best chance to knock off this Valtakunia team. But they are loaded with 18 players from the countries that will be favorites going into the quarterfinals tomorrow. They have 18 players from countries that will be favorites. I don't know what the count was on East End as far as players from countries that will be favorites, but I'm guessing it was closer to 10 than 18. So it looks promising for Valtakunia going forward.
Yeah, I honestly, they're easily the favorites on paper, and as much as I like to see an upset, at least one tomorrow, I don't think we're going to get an upset. And so I think they're going to be sitting pretty heading into semifinals on Friday, and then the gold and bronze medal games. Because like even if your guy loses in the semifinal, you're still getting another game in the bronze. And I know some teams don't get up for the bronze, but some guys are like, hey, this is point day now. I'm going to try and get as many points or whatever. So you're still getting another game. It's sometimes a lackluster game, but it's still another game and still an opportunity, even if you lose in the semifinal. It's winning that quarter game that guarantees you the extra 2 games, right? If you lose in the quarters, you're done. If you win the quarter game, you at least get 2 more games because of that bronze medal game. So it'll be really interesting. If an upset happens, then it throws a wrench into things. If it doesn't, then it's probably Valtakunia's to lose. Although, here's number 3 on the list, and a team that will like to make some noise on the weekend as well.
We've talked a lot about the 1-2 racing, and we haven't mentioned Scoreway nearly enough. As far as Scoreway with that 3-day tournament in December, they were leading after 3 days. And, I had them in the battle for bronze, the big grouping, but I didn't have them emerging as the favorite for bronze. And so far, wire to wire, they've been in the top 3 through the first week through the group stage, getting big contributions from Joachim Kemmel. He's obviously the second ranked forward in UFWJ fantasy points. Emil Andre is the number 1 ranked defenseman in UFWJ fantasy points. And Bruno Bruveres, the guy nobody knew, everybody knows who Bruno is now, is tied for second in goaltending or in goaltenders for fantasy points. So they have the number 2 forward, the number 2 defenseman, the number 2 forward, the number 2 goaltender, and the number 1 defenseman as far as fantasy points go. But one thing you're going to see here, Dean, compared to Valtakunia, which we were just looking at, is take a look at the players that are likely to advance tomorrow. And, to start with, Dean, Scoreway only has 18 players here versus 23 for Valtakunia. Valtakunia has 5 more players to start with. But then you start looking, okay, they got a couple Czechia players, they got a German, they got a Swiss, they got, look at their defense. Other than the 2 Swedes projecting, as far as favorites go tomorrow, they're going to be down to 2D after tomorrow for the semifinals in the medal round. They're not going to have any goaltenders left unless Latvia or Switzerland pulls a stunning upset, and Pashy's the backup for Switzerland anyway. And then, even you look at their Canadians with Denoyer and Gaucher and Kidney. Those are the bottom 3 forwards on Canada's depth chart right now. They're the lower end guys. Riley Duran's a real depth guy for the Americans, third liner. Brad Lambert hasn't had a great tournament for Finland. He scored in the opener, hasn't done much since. So really, you're looking at Joachim Kemmel, the top pairing for Sweden on defense, especially if Simon Edmondson can't play in the medal round. You're looking at so you're really looking at, Kemmel and the top pairing from Sweden. Is that going to be enough to hold off the rest of the field when it comes? We were looking at this as some people are saying a 3-horse race. That the number 4 team in the standings, Country, Monstopia, has already emerged as a seller, and we're only halfway through. But now you look here, this could basically be down to 3 impact players after tomorrow for those final 2 games. And with Scoreway having the second least players advancing, only Republic of the Seven Seas, Dean, has less players advancing to the medal round with 16. Scoreway only has 18. So that's a big disadvantage. Even you look at Anarchia, they have 22, including a lot more Canadians and Americans and Swedes and Finns that could get the 3 games versus the 1 game. So Scoreway's sitting pretty in third place right now, but we'll see how things look going into the semifinals. If they only have 2D left and no goaltenders, suddenly, there's going to be a medal race.
I think you nailed it. Brad Lambert has been underwhelming compared to how many people were talking about him in December. And yesterday he was on the 4th line. Like, he was on Finland's 4th line for a spell. And I know the lineups change and stuff, and guys get moved around, but I just, and I know he's got a lot of family and a great cheering section and some local. Maybe he's, maybe I joked yesterday the Finns were playing rope-a-dope against Canada. I don't think that they are. But, Lambert has been underwhelming. And you know what? The Swedes have been underwhelming. I mean, I didn't think the Swedes were even awake in that American game until the final 10 minutes. So the Swedes and a couple of guys have been underwhelming. The Americans have been better than they thought. The Canadians have been right there. Most of the Finns, but there are some guys and some teams that, maybe they're saving it. Maybe Sweden's doing the exact opposite of what they always did, right? Just, float through the medal round and then turn it up, or float through the preliminary and turn it up in the medal round. I don't know, but I just know that Lambert, like you said, I'm a fan and I want to see him succeed, but I was underwhelmed yesterday. He didn't seem to have the drive and the jump that some of the other guys did for Finland.
And you mentioned Kent Johnson. I mean, he's had a lot better tournament than Brad Lambert. But when you talk about guys that have another gear and haven't hit their stride yet in this tournament offensively, Brad Lambert is one that comes to mind because he was in the 2 games in December. One of his line was Finland's best line, and he was a driver on that line. And their coach has really been sending a message because the center on that line, Big Sammy Helenius, was a healthy scratch in the group stage because that line didn't pick up where they left off. And I believe Ville Koivunen, the third member of that line in December, was the healthy scratch against Canada yesterday. So the coach has really been sending them a message, and we'll see if the message has been received tomorrow when they play Germany. First thing, they start us off tomorrow for the quarterfinals. So if that line gets going for Finland, of course, you don't want that line to do too much damage because they take away from all East End's firepower. You're probably happy that they're the quiet line, but if they get going, then obviously that bodes well for Scoreway with Brad Lambert.
I honestly hope he gets going because I want to see that skill that everybody's talking about live. So I really hope he does get it going. Okay, let's move on to, you mentioned it, the number 4 team in the standings right now, and they're basically playing let's make a deal with Monty Hall and trying to trade everybody they can. They're taking a page out of Duckman's domination for a couple of years, but this is a very interesting situation. Could you imagine them ending up on the podium after selling? I mean, it's like, winning the cup and drafting, first overall or something like that, if that could ever happen.
Yeah, Monstopia is a country that is obviously turned the page to December. You look at Simon Edvinsson, you look at David Jirasek. Those are 2 awesome defenders. They're both going to be back in December unless they make the NHL at a training camp in a month, which is very possible. But even then, I would expect they would probably get loaned to this tournament. Jonathan Lekaramäki, he's not going to make the Canucks. He'll be in this tournament. So their best players outside of their goaltending, with Jesper Wallstedt being their franchise player essentially. Outside of him, the rest of their team will be back in December. And obviously they traded their other big 2002 born players in Coronado and Dufour. But when you look at this roster, Dean, and again, there could be upsets tomorrow. I'm not saying it's impossible, but if Canada, USA, Finland, Sweden emerge victorious tomorrow as the favorites, and all of a sudden Czechia, Germany, Switzerland, and Latvia are no longer, well, take a look at this lineup, right? I mean, you'd have 2 forwards left. Your only forwards would be Ostapchuk, who's kind of been down the depth chart or out of the lineup for Canada, and Lekaramäki, who's been good for Sweden, but another guy that has another gear. And then on defense, you'd have Edvinsson, who's been hurt. He missed the last game missed the big game against, or sorry, not the big game. He got hurt against USA and missed the game against Germany. But depending what his status is, he'd be their number 1 D. And then they would still have Ryan O'Rourke, who's a top 4 guy for Canada, logs a lot of minutes, but doesn't put up a ton of fantasy points. And did they trade Ryan O'Rourke?
Oh no, didn't Ryan O'Rourke? Didn't you just say?
Sabrango. Sabrango was traded by UConn. Yeah,
that's what it was. Sorry.
Yeah, so they still have O'Rourke, but then the other guy that missed the first couple games of the tournament and's been coming on strong is little Anton Olsson, defenseman. He's a smooth skater and been filling in pretty good for Sweden. And like I said, that entire Swedish team feels like, I think they got a little bit of momentum last night against Germany and that third period against the Americans, but they still have another gear to go. So if Lekaramäki and Edvinsson comes back and Olsson has a strong showing, and for Monstopia to challenge Scoreway for a medal, it all comes down to Jesper Wallstedt, if they keep Jesper Wallstedt, because they've made it known that once you trade Matt Coronado and William Dufour as 2 of your top forwards, Jesper Wallstedt is now available as well. So if they keep Wallstedt and he has 3 good games and Sweden comes out and lives up to Craig Button's prediction. He predicted Sweden for gold prior to the tournament. If Wallstedt, and he made that prediction based on Wallstedt being the best goaltender on paper in this tournament, if Wallstedt stands on his head for 3 more games, Monstopia could definitely challenge Scoreway, because Scoreway might have no goaltenders left after tomorrow. But again, you look at this roster, and there wouldn't be too much left. There'd be only, if the favorites all win tomorrow, they got only 2 forwards left, 3D, and then they're starting goaltenders. So these rosters are going to chip down. So let's just do the math there. 2 forwards, 3 defensemen is 5 players, and a goaltender. They have a lineup, basically 6 players. Well, we were just looking at Valtakunia. If all the favorites win tomorrow, Valtakunia sends 18 players with 2 extra games. Monstopia would only have 6 left, and Scoreway didn't have any more than 6 either. So again, we might see upsets tomorrow, and a lot of these countries are hoping for upsets based on the way their rosters are shaping up heading into this medal round in the Ultimate Fantasy World Juniors.
Yeah, I still don't think we're going to see any, but it would certainly throw a wrench into things if there was any kind of upset for sure. All right, this is the roster that I'm just so fascinated with. These guys, there's nobody that was hit harder, and then they were Republic of the Seven Seas hanging around a little bit, and they might have a guy in Marilainen who gets traded. I know they made it known, as you said, so maybe they get something back for December in that deal. But what do you like about this lineup and its ability to maybe sneak into that top 3?
Yeah, and like I said, maybe East End's waiting in the weeds on Levi Marilainen and go all in on Finland, or maybe you get Marilainen and Wallstedt and hope you have, although you can only start 1 goaltender each day, and they'd be playing on all the same days, so might not help to have 2 starting goaltenders and have that difficult decision going forward. But Levi Marilainen, returning goaltender, he might not have been the starter in December because Joel Blomqvist from Can West was looking like the number 1, but Marilainen's been really good for Finland in this tournament. And Thomas Suchanek, Jan Bednar got pulled in their last game, Czechia's last game. I wouldn't be surprised if Thomas Suchanek starts the quarterfinal tomorrow against USA tomorrow night, because Thomas Suchanek had such a great game against Canada. I wouldn't be surprised if Czechia goes with Suchanek instead of Bednar, but obviously we expect Republic of the Seven Seas, if they still have Levi Marilainen, will start Levi Marilainen tomorrow, Finland being the heavy favorite over Germany. But the big thing here, they had an eye to December as well. Their first 2 picks in the supplementary draft, because they lost 17 of 25 players and they had the first overall pick back in December, Republic of the Seven Seas had the first pick in every round of the supplementary draft, had to fill 17 spots. Unfortunately, again, like I said, they got no luck. Now they have the least players advancing to the medal round. Again, they only have 16 left, so they're decimated again. But Brennan Othman was their first overall pick in the supplementary draft, ahead of guys like Atu Ratti and Thomas Bordeleau and the others. And the reason that was, and Tyson Forster and some other guys, was because they looked at Brennan Othman as a guy that's going to be back in December. And you see a little bit of chemistry forming with Bedard and Othman, while Mason McTavish won't be back in December. But you're looking at probably Bedard and Othman being a 1-2 punch come December. So Othman, as mentioned, a healthy scratch in Canada's first game, took some undisciplined penalties in the pre-tournament, and has since been scoring, a physical presence, has probably the hit of the tournament on David Jirasek, and has been a really good player. But then the second round, they took, again, Sean Behrens, defenseman from the United States. He's been the extra. He's been the odd man out the last couple games for USA. They took him ahead of Thomas Bordeleau. If they wanted to make a run for a medal this summer, they really could have taken Atu Ratti first overall, and the way the draft worked out, they actually could have got Thomas Bordeleau at 6. So Ratti, Bordeleau versus Othman, Behrens. But again, looking to December when Othman and Behrens are going to be back, and I really think Republic of the Seven Seas would like to continue trading for December, because again, you look at Yuri Kulich, you look at Matyas Sapovalov. Those are 2 guys that are going to be there in December. They had a lot invested in Slovakia. This was a country, the reason they're decimated and have the least players going to the medal round is, they had a lot invested in Slovakia back in December. They took young Dalibor Dvorsky, who didn't have a great tournament, was one of their top picks, a guy that, should be a top 10, top 15 pick in in next year's NHL draft. They also had Servac Petrovsky as one of their top forwards who was a player of the game for Slovakia. And then a player, they lost 17 players, starting with Matvei Mishkov and some Russians. But another player that Republic of the Seven Seas lost that was their second round pick was Simon Nemec, Slovakia's number one defenseman. So when you think Slovakia misses the medal round, they get, not relegated because there is no relegation, but they miss the medal round. So they're eliminated now. So you lose out these extra, again, man games, games played, or currency. You lose out on all those Slovakia games from Dvorsky and Petrovsky, among others. But the big thing here is you lost out on Simon Nemec, who, if Slovakia brought their whole team, Republic of the, and especially if Russia showed up, Republic of the Seven Seas might have been your favorite for gold, even with a young team. And now all of a sudden, you're looking at this lineup saying, okay, if the favorites all win tomorrow, you got Brennan Othman, Victor Sternberg, who's a sort of a third line forward for Sweden. You got the number 8 defenseman who's not even dressing for USA, and you got Levi Merilainen. You got 2 forwards, 1 defenseman, and 1 goaltender left going into the semifinals. So again, it's tough to look at it that way, but if there's no upsets, a lot of these countries are cheering for upsets tomorrow. And Republic of the Seven Seas with those, again, I know East End's cheering for Czechia against the U.S. with Gut and Svozil, but Republic of the Seven Seas with Yuri Kulich, another guy who's got another level to hit in this tournament, could score a big goal. We saw him whiff on a one-timer against Canada and miss the net, a wide open net. He doesn't miss too many of those. And Sapovalov, big center from the Vegas Golden Knights recent draft pick. Those two guys that clue, and then Thomas Hamera on defense is probably one of Czechia's best defensemen, as well as Svozil for East End. But if Czechia could upset the U.S., all of a sudden things look a lot different, especially if Suchanek emerges as the goaltender for Czechia tomorrow. So Republic of Seven Seas will definitely be watching that game.
All right, chime in on the chat if you are joining us on Twitch, or if you're watching us a little bit later on our YouTube channel. Check out some of the other shows that we have here on the network. If you're on Twitch, just simply scroll down. You can find all of our social media, links to our merch, Instagram, everything you need to know about Ultimate Franchise Fantasy Sports. We are talking about the Ultimate Fantasy World Junior right now. I'm Dean Millard, Larry Fisher with me as well, as we move into the second half, which could easily be a medal contender because the standings are close, and you don't have as many guys playing. Well, some people don't, but there's still the potential for some big days. As I said, if we don't win gold, we just need to beat Anarchia. So far we are, so our second accomplishment is happening. What do you like about Arnie, Brent, and Jason's lineup here from Crown Sports?
Another underachieving lineup for the most part in the group stage, but what you have to focus on right off the bat is the goaltending. If Canada with Garand and Kosa, that's going to be the tandem. Garand being the number 1 there, but that's going to be the tandem for Anarchia going into the medal round. And Canada's been the most dominant team through the group stage, so you're probably looking at the most goaltending points over the next 3 games potentially. But Anarchia's got a lot of players. Again, I keep going back to that same rhetoric. If the favorites advance, Dean, they got 6 forwards, 2 from the U.S., 2 from Finland, 2 from Sweden. They got 5 defensemen, 2 from Canada, 2 from the U.S., 1 from Sweden, and they got both their goaltenders. The one that matters, whoever's starting for Canada, they got the top 2. So you're looking at 6, 5, and 2. That's 13 or 12 if you want to say, because count the goaltenders as 1. But 12 players going to the medal round. If the favorites win tomorrow, we looked at Scoreway, we looked at Monstopia, we looked at some of these teams ahead that are going to be down to 5 or 6 players. Well, now we're looking at Anarchia that might have 12 players going into that medal round. If you're 30 points back, 40 points back, but you got double the players with 2 more games, I don't know. I think Anarchia still has a chance. And what Anarchia likes, Dean, is we talked about Brad Lambert. We talked about Sami Helenius being a healthy scratch for Finland. Well, guess who came back with their first goal against Canada yesterday? Sami Helenius. He's off the schneid. Daniel Lungman last night, Dean, 2 goals for Sweden against Germany. I said he'd be one of Sweden's best players in this tournament. Very quiet in the group stage. Last night he wakes up, he gets the bunt single that they reviewed for the high stick. He also had a quick release, just whipped one home. He's got a great shot. All of a sudden, some of these guys are going. Another guy, we talk about Kent Johnson not having a quieter group stage. Matthew Nyes, big physical power forward for the U.S. I don't think he scored a goal yet, but he's been around it. He's hit some posts. He's got a breakout game coming as well. And certainly with Brock Faber, talk about, we're looking at the top 5 defenders, Dean, and Brock Faber wouldn't even be in the top 10. He's got like 10 fantasy points through 4 games. Last year, then we're going back a whole year, Dean, back to the 2021 tournament. USA won gold. Brock Faber was the top defender in that tournament as an underager. He led all defensemen in scoring in 2021. Now here we are a year and a half later in 2022, and he had a really quiet group stage. So Brock Faber's got another. He's been an effective player for the U.S. He's looked good, but he's been overshadowed by Luke Hughes, and some of their other defensemen have chipped in on the score sheet. Brock Faber could explode as well. So I keep looking at Anarchia's lineup with the amount of players if the favorites win tomorrow, and some of these guys that have had slow starts to the tournament. I think Arnie, Brent, and Jason are a potential dark horse here with Crown Sports and Entertainment and the country known as Anarchia, still a medal contender despite sitting in 6th place through the group stage.
Oh, just getting inundated with DMs now from teams talking.
The sellers are emerging.
Yeah, they're just desperate to sell here. It's like door-to-door salesmen here trying to sell me a vacuum or something like that. Faber, you know why? Luke Hughes is basically a rover. Like that guy, it's fun to watch, and I can't wait to see him as he progresses. But Faber's basically just been hanging back, covering as Hughes skates all over the place. It's fun to watch, but like that Faber, I know, I love watching him play. Like he just was steady, but it hasn't translated into fantasy points where Hughes is flying all over the place. Fun to watch, definitely, don't get me wrong, but that's why Faber has not contributed as much, because he's been the guy hanging back the whole time while Hughes is up skating all over the place. But Hughes he's basically a rover out there.
He is, and we compared Brock Faber to a guy like Jared Spurgeon, who also plays that sort of cover role. And easy comparison, because now Brock Faber's been traded. His rights have been traded from LA to Minnesota. Obviously plays at the University of Minnesota, but he's going to be part of the Minnesota Wild going forward. Kind of the replacement for Jared Spurgeon at some point down the road, similar type player. But at this level, best on best in his age group, he's always been an offensive catalyst. And I think he has more offense to add. I just looked it up, Dean, 11.47 fantasy points in 4 games in the preliminary round. And time on ice is a category. So a lot of that 11 points is time on ice. I'm looking at the top defenseman through the round, or through, not the round robin, the group stage. Emil Andre, 29.05 fantasy points. Olin Zellweger, 24.73. The fifth defenseman, Kasper Puušiodin from Finland, from East End, 22.71 fantasy points. Brock Faber from Anarchia, 11.47. Puušio's doubling him in fantasy points, and Faber led this tournament in scoring for defensemen 18 months ago. So Brock Faber is underachieved, even though he's been having to cover for Luke Hughes, who Luke Hughes is number 3 out of the top 5 defensemen at 23.79 fantasy points. And again, his partner Brock Faber's at 11.47, half as many points. Anarchia would probably like to see Luke Hughes take turns on rushing the puck and let Faber get into the offense a little more. Oh, I don't hear you, Dean.
Oh, there we go. That's much
better.
There we go. We'll get into the final 4 of our countries here. And like I said, I think some of these countries, whether it's an upset or some guy just goes crazy and has a great game, they can certainly move up. But let's go with UCAN Republic. And you know what? This is a franchise that, like, when I look at what Sweden did, like, they were direct benefactors of Calle Klang getting that starting. You know, and I felt bad for Wallstad taking all the blame the other day. It was absolutely ridiculous against the U.S. for him to take that blame. But this is a situation where, you know, I would have expected Wallstad to play almost every game. They got some real benefits out of taking Calle Klang and getting some action out of that. Obviously, I'm a fan of Mackie Samoskevich. I've liked his game, and Jarventi, obviously. Lysell has been quiet, as a lot of Swedes I found this week have been quiet.
And I think karma here, Dean, for UCAN Republic. The hockey gods smiled on Calle Klang because UCAN Republic lost the Russian goaltending tandem, Yaroslav Askarov and Yegor Guskov. That was their first round pick back in December, was Askarov. UCAN Republic was picking from the back of the field, 10th. They were the 10th country in every round. They took Askarov. Obviously, they lost him. They tried to get the strategy back here and take they coming into this tournament, nobody knew who was going to be the starting goaltender for the United States. Was it going to be Caden Mberico? There was lots of rumors it was going to be Remington Koppel, who now is the number 3 for the U.S. And Andrew Oak was kind of an unknown, and he got the other start in the group stage. Obviously, Mberico played 3 of the 4 games, but Oak and Koppel split a shutout, Dean. And as you know, IIHF rules, which are also NHL rules. If you split a shutout, no goaltender gets credited for the shutout. That's just the rules in the NHL as well as the IIHF. It's a team stat. A team gets the shutout. USA got the shutout, but neither of the goaltenders are credited with a shutout. But UCAN Republic did get a shutout from Calle Klang. So that's where I say the hockey gods smiled on UCAN Republic and got Calle Klang 2 starts that nobody would have predicted. Everybody thought Wallstad would play at least 3 of the 4. And I mean, I think you're absolutely right, Dean. Wallstad's quote was, "I betrayed my entire team or country." He made 38 saves on 41 shots. There was only one somewhat bad goal. The U.S. probably had 7 or 8 grade A chances in the third period. He stopped them all when once it was 3-0. So, but that's the standard that Jesper Wallstad holds himself to, especially at this level. He probably thinks he's capable of being the starting goaltender for the Minnesota Wild this coming season and being a top 20, top 10 goaltender in the NHL. So when he's playing against his peers that this is 3rd or 4th World Juniors, he expects a shutout every night. So when he stops 38 of 41, 980 save percentage or 970, whatever that is, great save percentage. In his mind, that's a failure and a letdown. But Calle Klang gets a shutout here for UCAN Republic. But UCAN Republic just made that trade, Dean. We can cross off those top 2 defenders. Bye-bye Sabrango and Hemoselmi. And again, when I'm talking about the amount of players going into that next round, had they kept those 2 players, all 3 of their goaltenders would be expected to go, maybe not get playing time, but they would have been there. And you would go 5 deep on the D. They had the 4 Finns and a Canadian. All would have been into the next round, as well as the top 3 forwards with an American, a Finn, and a Swede. So now you take off the top 2 D, and UCAN Republic with Anarchia might have been able to challenge for scoreway for a medal in this medal round. And now you got to pump the brakes a little bit on UCAN Republic's chances now that they've emerged as a seller. But I look at this again, Dean. Lysell will be back at Christmas. Mackie Samoskevich will be back at Christmas. A number of these guys are going to be returning players for UCAN Republic. They also were another country, Dean, that really got hit with the surprise of the Latvians, because they had Matej Kazlik, who was probably the most effective Slovakian forward in the tournament. I know Adam Sikora of East End was really good too, but Matej Kazlik scored some nice goals, had their game winner or shootout winner in the only game they won. And they also had Jakub Demek from the Edmonton Oil Kings, a Vegas draft pick, Vegas prospect, was also with UCAN Republic. So had Slovakia made the medal round, they would have a couple more good quality top 6 top line forwards from their respective countries advancing. But again, I think they look at Samoskevich and Lysell as guys that'll be there in December and a bit of a retool. But they do have some 2002 born players that won't be back as well, including the goaltenders. So I believe both those goaltenders all 3 of those goaltenders are 2002, so they won't be back. So they'll be reloading in goal again, just like they had to with the loss of Yaroslav Askarov.
Yeah, that's that was just the Russian, COVID cancels the tournament, and then Russia gets kicked out. We were one of the countries that I think we only had 1 Russian on our roster. We have Miroshnichenko on our reserve list. So that would have certainly probably helped us or whatever if he would have been able to get back. But the Russian thing was really, really hard for a lot of people and certainly a lot of countries. And again, there's so many things that are out of your hands in fantasy, and that is one of the bigger ones. All right, let's take a look at Can West. And like that's actually a pretty decent, well, it's a lot of defensemen. I don't know if they've even lost a defenseman, but that's a lot of forwards as far as numbers. Games played is currency. I don't know how many of those guys are going to get through, but they also have the best name in Ivan in the tournament.
Absolutely. And so, yeah, tied for, I guess it'd be third as far as players making it into the medal round. And again, you go pretty deep there with a Canadian off the top, couple Americans, couple Finns, couple Swedes. Obviously, the big loss here, again, we just talked about Slovakia getting eliminated, but Simon Lakazi, Dean, was the fourth-ranked goaltender in the group stage with 19 fantasy points, only 4 points behind Dylan Garand. So if Slovakia makes, again, he's probably going to get lit up tomorrow, but if he was in the quarterfinals, but again, with the saves, those fantasy points would have really helped Can West, because you look at this, they don't have a goaltender. Those are the number twos, number threes on the depth chart for Switzerland and Latvia, who aren't expected to advance. They have three defensemen. Truscott's been playing more and more, and he actually got some shifts with Luke Hughes as well. They're teammates at the University of Michigan. Truscott and Hughes. So Truscott's getting some minutes for the U.S. Topi Niemela, who we expected to be the top D for Finland. He's been leading them in ice time, but hasn't had the offensive impact that some expected. And Leo Loof is a real physical guy for Sweden. And then they got a couple Germans, a couple Swiss, and a Czechia defenseman that, again, if you're going on, if we're doing the bracket and we're doing the favorites are advancing, they'd have 3D, no goaltenders, but they'd have a whack of forwards. And that's where their strength, even if they don't get Ivan, if his middle name's Ivan, I don't think it is, but that was a running joke at the Christmas tournament. But, you can count them up there. That's 3, 5, 7 deep on forwards. Not too many other countries are 7 deep in forwards going into the final 2 games. So, and there's some impactful guys there. Oscar Olason's one of the better forwards for Sweden. Carter Mazer might be the surprise of the tournament,
awesome.
Dean. He's been awesome on that top line for the U.S. Detroit stole him in the later rounds. He was awesome in NCAA. If you watch NCAA, he's probably not a revelation, but if you look at his draft position, 6th, 7th round, and to come here and be one of the best players in the tournament and one of USA's leading goal scorers, that's a surprise. If you don't know who Carter Mazer was in December, you know who he is now, and he's a legit prospect for the Detroit Red Wings and a go-to guy for Can West. So between Olason and Mazer, and again, Joshua Roy's had a good tournament. Yep. He plays with Ridley Gregg and William Dufour and gets some second unit power play time for Canada. And then even a guy like Liam Ongren, who could, he's getting his feet wet at the World Juniors. He's a young guy, first time playing U20 best on best. He's probably going to be better in the quarterfinals and then even better in the semifinals in the medal game. So again, you're looking at 7 and 3 is, 10 skaters from Can West are probably going to get 3 games if there's no upsets. That's more than a lot of other countries. So when you look at Anarchia and Can West now, because UCAN Republic traded away their top 2 D or 2 of their better D to maybe take themselves out, Can West and Anarchia are 2 of the countries that could certainly challenge Scoreway for bronze. And who knows, I really do think East End and Valtakunia, it would take a miracle for somebody to knock off one of those 2 as gold and silver, or a massive blockbuster trade where you loaded up half your roster for 3 first-round picks and your best guys from the protected list and your best future players. I don't see that blockbuster coming down. The Insider hasn't heard any of these countries that are on the fringe going to load up tonight, but barring something like that, I think East End and Valtakunia are battling it out for gold. But I think Scoreway's got to keep Anarchia, and now we're talking about Can West in the rearview mirror, as well as possibly some of these other countries still to come, Dean.
I mean, these guys are 8th right now. This is my sleeper pick to medal. Like, I don't know if they'll win, but I think Can West with some of those guys, like you said, Topi Niemela hasn't had the offensive production that you would expect from that running that top power play. And like that power play was 60% at one point. This is my dark horse team to end up on the podium is Can West. So we'll see what happens. The number 9 team is Elite Prospectia. Again, another country that has a fair amount of players, and they do have some pretty skilled guys at the top end. Even a guy like Simon Knack. They've got some blue liners who are interesting. What do you think about Elite Prospectia heading into the medal round and beyond?
Another country that could make some noise. Circling back to Can Westing, I had to crunch the numbers from 3rd to 8th after the group stage preliminary round. Scoreway is 68.67 points in 3rd place ahead of Can West in 8th. So between 3rd and 8th is 68.67 fantasy points. Yeah. We've talked about it, Dean. 78 points in a day, 75 points in a day. If all of a sudden you have double the players for 2 extra games, 68 points might not be that much to make up. So Can West might be a sleeper, much like Anarchia. I mean, I don't think the bronze is locked up for Scoreway by any means, but Elite Prospectia, talk about countries that might be able to enter the conversation. They got 3 Canadians that have been very, productive, but not to the level that maybe they can get to either. But Ronan Seeley, stick tap to him. He's been quite productive on the back end for Elite Prospectia. He just missed the cut for the top 5 defenders. He was in and around that 20 fantasy points through the 4 group stage games. Tyson Forster's been heating up. He scored in back-to-back games. He's a guy that can fire the puck. Logan Stankoven's had a bit of a quiet tournament, along with Kent Johnson and obviously this Tyson Forster. That's the second line for Canada. That line's been getting better and better. Stankoven's a big game player. I've seen him step up at the biggest times for the Kamloops Blazers, and I think he's a guy that still has that 2-3 goal game left in him too. Sasha Pastujov, another young guy that's going to be back in December from the Americans, but he's a guy that seems to be getting better and better by the game for the United States as well. So those are the 3 big forwards. They also do have a depth forward from Finland and Sweden. So you got 5 forwards there. And then on the blue line, you have Ludwig Janssen, who's kind of been the extra for Sweden. So really you're down to Seeley there. But again, when we're talking about tomorrow, because we got to focus on the quarterfinals. I'm looking too far ahead. There could be upsets. If there's upsets, Elite Prospectia has difference makers. Simon Knack and Attilio Biasca. Attilio Biasca is the player of the day right now, Dean. We're talking about yesterday. He had the most fantasy points out of anybody in UFWJ on day 7 on Monday with Switzerland's 3-2 win over Austria. He scored that late power play game-winning goal and had 10 shots, Dean. 10 shots on goal for Attilio Biasca. So he's been a go-to guy along with Simon Knack for Switzerland. I don't think Switzerland's upsetting Canada, but certainly if that came to fruition or they made it a game, it would be because of those 2 players on their top line. They also have 2 of Germany's top forwards in Yannick Prosky and Luca Hoff. Ryan Del Monte is also a German forward. And they have Germany's captain and number 1 defenseman, Luca Munzenberger, who obviously is an Edmonton Oilers draft pick. And Luca Hoff is an Edmonton Oil Kings import for next season. So some Edmonton connections through the German players on Elite Prospectia. Their goaltending is going to be interesting, Dean, because who does Czechia start tomorrow? Pavel Kajin hasn't played yet in the tournament. He's been the number 3. Jan Bednar started as the number 1. He's had a couple shaky outings. He got pulled in their last game, I believe against Latvia. He got pulled in that 5-2 loss. And Thomas Suchanek came in for cleanup, and Suchanek played great against Canada. Obviously, he had the highest save total in the tournament so far, 52 saves, kept Canada to 5-1. Who goes for Czechia against the United States tomorrow? I'm starting to think Thomas Suchanek over Jan Bednar. That'd be bad news for Elite Prospectia. They wouldn't get a goaltending start in the quarterfinals. But overall, this country, again, with some good forwards and a real high-end defenseman in Seeley. But as far as picking up points in the quarterfinals, their depth guys from those countries that aren't expected to win, the underdogs going into the quarterfinals, their depth are some of the best players on those underdogs. And they could certainly rack up and close the gap tomorrow coming out of the quarterfinals. Even if they don't have many players advancing to the semifinals, they might make a move in the standings just from their depth guys from the countries that end up getting eliminated in the quarters.
We'll see if the spirit of Martin Gerber helps out Switzerland against Canada, because remember that Olympic upset that happened many, many years ago. All right, the final franchise, the final country in UFWJ is Midgard, who we know from earlier, made a pretty big deal looking ahead to the future. But that's still a heck of a lot of players going into the medal rounds.
It is. They have the most players. Well,
Yeah.
now
Right.
Valtakunia one up them because Valtakunia acquired 2 more. So Valtakunia has 23 players. They have all 14 forwards, 7 defensemen, and 3 goaltenders. But here again, you got the vast majority of their lineup, 23 players, are making it to the quarterfinals, and a number of them. I mean, you're going pretty deep down that list as well of guys that should, if the favorites win, advance, should be advancing to the extra 2 games played. Of course, the only move they made was trading their number 1 goaltender, Caden Mberico, who has got 17 fantasy points for Valtakunia since that trade. So you add 17 points onto Midgard, and they're moving up a couple spots in the standings. And then you have Mberico in the play or in the medal round, and if he gets 3 games, maybe Midgard could have challenged. So that's the thing with trading in UFWJ. You make one trade, it can really swing things, even though you have a 25-man roster. One important player going from having a number 1 goaltender to having 3 number 3 goaltenders is a big swing. That's been 17 points through 3 games so far for Mberico. But they do have Logan Cooley, who's going to be a star again in the December tournament. He's their franchise player. Their protected list has Aaron Kitty Harju, who's going to be the future of Finland on defense. So this is a country that's built for the next couple years. But in the present, a guy like Red Savage is having a great tournament for the Americans. I know High Level Scouting, I believe, has Red Savage, so they're happy with his performance in this tournament. He's really stepped up to be a leader first and foremost, but he's contributing his share of fantasy points. Magnuson scored a goal for Sweden yesterday, a little forward. He's on the score sheet. Raisavi, if Czechia makes an upset over USA, he obviously had that breakaway goal on Dylan Garand. They had to review. He ripped it so hard off the back bar, but he plays with Moose Jaw in the WHL, so another import guy. And then you look at their defense. Wyatt Kaiser had a 2-goal game in the preliminary round. He only had 2 goals, Dean, over 2 college seasons, and then he has 2 goals in the same game here at the World Juniors and in UFWJ for Midgard. They also have another American defenseman, Jack Pert, who's been playing. Petteri Nurmi plays big minutes for Finland. He's kind of the forgotten guy there because he doesn't put up many fantasy points, but he's their big shutdown guy. And William Wallander's been very effective for Sweden as well. So again, you're looking at 4D, you're looking at, what is that, 6 forwards. And so, yeah, I mean, realistically looking at 10 skaters potentially. If all the favorites win, Midgard would still have 10 skaters going into the semifinals. So if they didn't trade Mberico, maybe we're talking about the last place country, 10th place, potentially challenging for bronze still with 2 extra games to play for 10 of their skaters. So it's going to be interesting. We're only halfway done. Like you said, Dean, there's a lot of hockey to be played, both in the World Juniors and here in UFWJ. We're not expecting any upsets tomorrow in the World Juniors. Do we see any upsets in the medal standings and the way that the rest of Ultimate Fantasy World Juniors plays out, or do the favorites stay in medal position? That's the big question.
Well, let's look at your medal predictions. This is your predictions after the redraft that we just had. So Valtakunia 1, East End 2, Anarchia 3. Going into the medal rounds now, after everything we just discussed, would you stick with that?
Those are my 3 in the exact same order. We should probably put an asterisk, Dean, beside Valtakunia because they've brought in a few ringers. East End's in first place, topping the overall standings coming out of the group stage, the preliminary round. But Valtakunia, adding Mberico as their, now having a number 1 goaltender, which East End could get by the end of the day, but doesn't have as we're talking now. And so having that extra goaltender, and then also obviously having Coronado and Dufour as 2 extra depth ringers. And then did we say they have 18 players? If there's no upsets tomorrow, they have 18 skaters going into the semifinals and medal games. That would be double most the competition is lucky to have 8 to 10, and they'd have 18. So I think Valtakunia on paper is still the overwhelming favorite for gold. even though East End had the best showing in the group stage. And I think East End is a lock for silver. I think I don't see anybody catching, again, 75, 78 points in a day is possible, but East End is going to have Canada, Finland. There's enough talent on East End and enough of a gap that I think East End settles in nicely for second and a silver lining for the inaugural UFWJ tournament, unless East End grabs a couple ringers before midnight tonight. And then Anarchia, they're down in, are they 6th place right now? I'm sticking with them. I like that Canadian goaltending tandem. As mentioned, you look at Scoreway, they're down to a handful of players if there's no upsets tomorrow, and Anarchia still has 12. So if it's 12-5 for 2 extra games, I think Anarchia can close that 40-point gap pretty quickly. So I'm going to stick with my medal predictions. No changes after the preliminary round. And we'll see if Craig Button does the same, because he has Sweden winning gold. And we'll see. I know they're going to give him a mulligan or a chance to change it tonight on TSN as well. So what about yourself, Dean? I know you had some predictions heading into the tournament. Are you sticking with them?
Yeah, I'll say, we had East End first. I don't know if we're going to be able to compete in the arms race with Valtakunia. I mean, our trade talks as of late have been basically this. That's what our trade talks, where, like Valtakunia is buying everything. I do not think we are going to be a buyer. Now, that could change. I'm getting messages right now. The prices are changing as we're getting closer to the deadline. I just don't know what we're willing to give up as far as December for this tournament. When we're sitting in first place, we have a really good shot at medaling. I don't know if we have to do a whole lot. The only thing I think we need to do is a goalie. But I'll go Valtakunia, East End, and I'll go Can West as the number 3 team. Like I said, I think they're the kind of the dark horse to maybe sneak into that position. But who knows? It could be wild. I mean, if Finland gets knocked out, we're a bottom 5 team. Like, if Finland loses tomorrow, we are in the bottom 5 because there's 6 of our guys right there. So a lot can happen in the next little while, in the next day. Tomorrow's I think tomorrow's gonna decide a lot. If the favorites go through, then those 4 teams have 2 more games and you can start looking at it. If there's an upset, that's where we're gonna see it. What about the actual tournament? Do you still sticking with Canada, Finland, and was it Sweden or USA that you had third?
Yeah, I had Finland defeating Canada for the gold, and I had Sweden over the Americans for bronze. And after watching Canada-Finland head-to-head, I can't go against Canada now. I just think Finland will have a stronger showing if that's the rematch for gold. But I think Canada, again, I think guys like Kent Johnson and Logan Stankoven, they still have another gear. There'll be somebody else that can step up if McTavish and Bedard drop off a little bit. So I think if I get a mulligan, I would take Canada for gold over Finland. I think Finland's the finalist. And then I think the more I watch this tournament, even though I don't like betting against Jesper Wallstedt, I think the Americans, even though it was a 3-2 game over Sweden, I think that result repeats itself in the bronze game as well. I think USA over Sweden again for bronze, which now I think I've changed my medal predictions, Dean, to mirror yours, if I'm not mistaken. I think that's exactly how you had the WJC medal predictions going into the tournament.
Well, yeah, I'm going to go Finland over Canada in the gold then. So I'm flipping. We basically have just made a trade. It's like, Larry, you don't have any skin in this game. This is the only way you can trade. So we're going to trade medal predictions here. And I will take Sweden to beat the USA. So exact opposite of what you did, because I think Sweden realized, like, we're so good we can coast. We've been focused on the preliminary round for so much. They're getting better and better. I didn't like them very much until the last 10 minutes of that USA game, but what they showed me in that last 10 minutes and what I've seen from Wallstedt makes me think that they could win in that kind of game. But it's also wishful thinking for me picking Finland, because that's really good for UFWJ. So that's what I'll go with, and it makes it better when we're different. Like, we're exact opposite of what we did before. I don't know how that happens.
Literally, we flipped the script, yeah, because I had Finland over Canada and Sweden winning bronze, and you had Canada over Finland with USA winning bronze. We've literally flipped the script backwards. But it's going to be exciting, Dean, and I really do think you mentioned there with one game winner takes all in a medal game. It's hard to go against Jesper Wallstad because he is no matter who would start for the Americans, and we could see Canada USA in the final yet too, Dean, because remember they reseed after I guess we couldn't, because Canada USA, if they both win, will be the higher seeds because they were undefeated in the preliminary or in the group stage. So they would so no, that's right then. So they wouldn't play each other in the semis. So it could be Canada USA final. So that's probably the betting odds would actually be Canada USA and for gold. And in that case, I would still go Canada. But again, if Jesper Wallstad and Sweden end up, say Finland beats the US and Canada beats Sweden in the semifinals, if that's how it goes, and then it's Sweden and USA in bronze. Even though I take USA, the goaltending fraternity, however you want to say it for us, Jesper Wallstad against Caden Mberico in a rematch. I think Wallstad could steal a game and really shut things down. So even though I'm taking the U.S., it pains me to bet against a goaltender of the caliber of Wallstad.
Yeah, it's all I can say. It's going to be fun. I'm lucky enough and privileged to be able to go to the rink in person and watch this, and I'll be there bright and early. I might just actually grab an Uber right now, head to the rink, and sleep there. I like sleeping in cold spaces, so that's actually perfect. And then 4 games tomorrow, 2 games on Friday, 2 games on Saturday. It's going to be absolutely epic, and we'll be following along with the UFWJ like we have for the last little while. And then right away, we're so close to the start of the season and so close to December again. So it's going to be really interesting to see how this changes as we go and how it builds. It's been so much fun to follow along and be a part of it. Larry, thanks as always for your knowledge and your time tonight. This has been great. I can't wait to recap it, hopefully with a gold medal around my neck, and enjoy the rest of the Ultimate Fantasy World Juniors. People can find more information. They can head to the UFF website, uffsports.com. I think I can actually bring that up here. And then they can check out the rosters on the website and things like that, and find out who they should be cheering for.
They can, Dean. And as a final thought, I was just thinking, with Finland playing tomorrow morning, the early game, let's hope Esa Tiikkanen's not back in Edmonton showing the Finnish boys the sights tonight, because they wouldn't want to have any sort of a group stage hangover against Germany, because Germany's a live underdog, especially they have some goaltenders, whether it's Cap or Bugle, that could potentially steal a game. And obviously Germany doesn't have Peterka, Reichel, and Stützle. But Germany, they play a tough game, a gritty game, and I believe they gave Finland a good game, or could give Finland a good game. But also, as a final thought, for the prize pool breakdown, just a refresher, because December was so long ago, the countries that are watching might not even remember what they're competing for. So again, the gold medal winner gets 50% of the prize pool. Silver medal winner gets 5% of the prize pool, and bronze gets 15% of the prize pool. And off the top of the prize pool, Dean, $50 USD goes to the player awards, and that goes $10 each to the top forward, the top defender, and the top goaltender, and then $20 to the tournament MVP as voted by the UFWJ countries. So after that gold medal game, the countries will submit their ballots of who they feel was the tournament MVP. And again, if you're basing it on fantasy points, as of today, it's Captain Canada, Mason McTavish of Valtakunia, 42.40 fantasy points through the group stage, including 7 goals, leading the tournament in goal scoring. He had a 4-goal game. And the next closest team is Joakim Kemmel of Scorewave, a Finland forward, 33.93 fantasy points. You can basically say a 10-point lead for Mason McTavish as far as the MVP race goes. But if Jesper Wallstad steals gold, it might not matter on fantasy points as much. He might still emerge as the tournament MVP for both the World Juniors and for UFWJ.
Well, for somebody, it's going to be some nice, sweet score. And they'll be cashing in as they take it and laugh all the way to the score bank. Larry, thank you so much for joining me. I really look forward to seeing all these countries at the next Olympics, all these emerging countries that have stars that aren't here, whether it's Austria or Germany, the Swiss. It's just going to be so fun to watch all these countries, and we'll be along for the ride. This has been your Ultimate Fantasy World Junior Medal Round preview. For Larry Fisher, I'm Dean Millard. Good night, and we'll chat again very soon.